Kamala Harris just gave the closing speech of the DNC this year, and it was close to a home run. The Gaza part was a little mediocre. We'll explain that in a minute, maybe less than mediocre. But maybe it's an inside the ballpark home run. And so every other part of the speech was nearly pitch perfect. So we're gonna break it down for you guys. First of all, a lot of politicians give hokey speeches about only in America, etc. But the fact that she lived that life makes it so much more real, right? So when Bill Clinton says only in America, and yeah, he was poor and grew up poor in Arkansas, etc. There's truth to that. There's reality to that, right? When Donald Trump says only in America, you're like, well, no, actually you could be born incredibly rich in Malaysia, in France, in so many other countries, and then you'll have the same exact advantages, right? But when your mom comes from India and your dad comes from Jamaica, and then you're middle class here, and you grow up to run for president, become vice president, and run for president of the United States, it goes to the strength and the beauty of this country. That's why my family came, because you go to any other country, you ain't gonna be president. You ain't gonna be their leader, okay? Maybe you could get by, maybe you could do a lot of things, but you can't do that. And that's what's awesome about America, and that's what Trump and the Republicans don't understand. This country isn't great because of the particular people that happen to be born here at any different time. It's great because the whole world believes in it. The whole world believes in the American dream and the opportunity, and they send the best of us, right, throughout the world here, and then get to a situation like that. And she delivered that story really effectively and made people believe, and made me believe, because it's true that that's the life that she lived, and that's why she loves this country and wants to stick up for this country. And her story is the one that shows, among others, that anything is possible because it just happened for her family. Okay, now when she talked about different experiences that she had in her life, she was a prosecutor. Now you could say, hey, you know what? She was a tough prosecutor in a lot of ways, went after a lot of bad guys and had very harsh sentences for people who committed significant crimes,
Good.
Right?
Yeah.
And then she did some reforms, and people can look at that and go, oh, she's trying to have it both ways. And she's a politician trying to put her finger in the wind and, oh, is it going this way, or is it going that way? I'll give you a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Or you could look at it and go, well, that's kind of balanced. That's what you should do. You should throw the book at the people who are terrible people and bad guys, etc. Keep everybody safe. And then for the people who had minor offenses, she like minor drug offenses, she would bring them into rehab, and she made a strong effort to bring them into rehab and demanded that there be money to bring them into rehab.
Yep.
There's an excellent case to be made that that's balanced.
I remember specifically noting that I wanted her to lean into her past as a prosecutor, because I feel that it is important as a national level leader to talk about the importance of public safety and prosecuting specifically violent criminals, rapists, okay, sexual predators, people who commit murder. And I'm really happy she did that. And it's important that she did that, not only for my own purposes and how important I find public safety, but because, listen, if she's gonna move forward with this framing of I am a prosecutor, Donald Trump is the criminal, well, then you need to placate the far left that seems to think it's okay to take it easy on those violent criminals, right? To explain what the importance of public safety is and how it's good that she is proud of her history as a prosecutor.
Yeah, and I thought she did that really effectively.
She did,
right?
I liked it,
she didn't just say I'm tough on crime generically. She explained why she was tough on crime to protect the victims. And the story that she had of her friend who was sexually abused. So she said that's why she became a prosecutor. Is that the main reason, the only reason? I don't know. There's no way of knowing, right? But it's a powerful story.
Absolutely.
Right. And if it really was the main reason she became a prosecutor, then I respect her even more, right? I've got to protect people like this friend of mine that my family took into our house because she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. So that's protecting us. That's what you do. Look, a lot of people said in their speeches throughout the DNC, there's that line of that every prosecutor says when they step up in the beginning of a case, Kamala Harris for the people, right? But in her case, number one, she actually proved it through the different cases that she explained and why she got it. Second of all, she made a good point. Whether you're work as a district attorney general or as a politician, her only client in her entire career has been the people. And
yes. And so in order to highlight that, she also brought up, I mean, look, honestly, this speech had something for everyone, right? Because she didn't only talk about going after the violent criminals. She also talked about, as an attorney general in the state of California, she went after the fraudsters. She pursued a homeowner's bill of rights. She went after the big banks. She went after the for-profit colleges that were defrauding students. She went after wage theft. So it wasn't just about going after violent crime. It was also about going after those engaging in financial crimes and fraud. And so I thought that was actually the most powerful part of her speech.
That's protecting the average guy, but also it's protecting the average middle-class family.
Yes.
There's a lot of bad actors trying to rip you off on Wall Street and other places, and she was a cop that stopped it.
Yeah.
Right, now look, perfect record? No, of course not. But were there parts of that record that were sterling? Yes. So, and it lays out a way of holding her accountable too. Because anybody that watches Young Turks knows, look, we're not naive, and we don't think that there's gonna be Shangri-La anytime there's a Democratic candidate, right? But that the California case where they got, originally the settlement was supposed to be $4 billion against the banks. And then she said no, and they cranked it up to $20 billion. If you don't know the backstory to that, what happened was that $4 billion settlement was ridiculous, and it was actually the banks getting off scot-free because of all the donations they'd given to both Republican and Democratic politicians. And progressives went ballistic over that settlement, and it created a lot of political pressure. And so then Kamala Harris was one of the lead prosecutors, not the only one, but one of the lead attorney generals in the different states that were prosecuting that case that said, no, okay, we're redoing it, and then got 20 billion. By the way, it does show you the corruption of the American political system, because they were gonna make that go away for $16 billion less, right? But she did it, and she got the 20 billion. Credit where credit is due, and that's huge credit. But that also gives you a roadmap, guys, for when she's president. You put political pressure on, you use your leverage. You don't just hope and pray that she does the right thing because she's a wonderful person. Look, this is a story that she tells. And to me, it was a pretty credible story.
Yeah.
A lot of times politicians tell stories and I go, I don't believe it. Okay, I don't believe it. Why do you believe some of it and not others? I believe most of this, but that doesn't mean she's gonna do great policies. They still have giant donor money behind them. All of the politicians do. So we've got to apply that pressure. But in the past, she has responded to that pressure, so that's good. So now on the middle class, Anna, real quick, she talked about building the middle class. And politicians used to talk about that all the time. That was the most standard thing that you would see in a speech. Bill Clinton talked about it ad nauseum. And then they kind of forgot about the middle class because they became so obsessed with donors. And they were all like, oh, we're gonna give tax cuts to businesses, and we're gonna do this for businesses, et cetera. And the middle class got lost. So the fact that she went back to it, I loved it. The fact that she said, we have to get housing prices under control, loved it. And
build housing. I like that when she addressed housing in her speech, it was brief, but it was really important to me that she focused on the right path in making housing affordable. Subsidizing down payments is not gonna make housing more affordable. It's gonna inflate prices if you have a housing shortage. So she focused on how we need to increase the inventory of housing. We need to build more houses. That is the right approach, and I was really happy to hear her say that.
Yeah, she talked about the opportunity economy, and that's another thing that I love. The right framing for any person going into politics, especially if you mean it. It would be amazing if you meant it, but even if you don't, the right way to reach people in America is that we all love opportunity. And so, and I wish some politician would one day do it. And of course I hope it's her, but at least she framed it the right way and she thinks about it the right way. Because what's the number one thing about this country, and there's a lot of great things about it and a lot of things we have to fix, right? The number one thing is we all at least get a shot. If we can give every person in this country, poor, middle class, or rich, a fair chance, an opportunity. We're not looking for equality of results. We're looking for equality of opportunity, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So she emphasized that was great, and that's all American, and everybody loves that. Both conservatives and liberals love that. And then she turned to Trump and said, "What is he going to do instead?" And I think Trump has made two massive policy errors in this campaign, and I don't think that when he does this normally, the Democrats have been terrible in pointing it out and taking advantage of it and letting people know why it's so bad. But in this speech, she did a pretty effective job of it. She said, "What's the one thing that he's proposed so far in economic policy? Another giant corporate tax cut that's going to cost us $5 trillion. And then we have to pay the $5 trillion. Guys, there is no magic. If the corporations don't pay it, we have to pay,
right.
Or it goes in the deficit, which we then have to pay off. Or then what they're going to do is they're going to cut our Social Security and Medicare to pay it off. Okay, so we can't take another $5 trillion and give it to the richest people on earth. So that is a massive political mistake by Donald Trump. And thank God she's finally pointing it out effectively, going, we're going to deliver something for you. He's going to deliver something for his rich buddies. And that is enormously true. Then she talked about the tariffs. Look, they have a number that says those tariffs, because they're so sky high, are going to cost the average American $4,000 a year, okay? And they're saying that's a tax on the middle class. I don't know that it's going to be $4,000, and those things are hard to estimate, but the tariff he's proposing is gigantic. And it does then add to the cost of consumer goods. You could view it as inflation, you could view it as a middle class tax, but whether the number is 4,000, 3,000, 4,500, whatever the number is, it's a big number and you're gonna have to pay for it. But meanwhile, again, the corporations get $5 trillion and then you've gotta pay extra because of the tariff. So it was good rhetoric, good policy, and true. Now, when you turn to social issues like freedom and control over your own body, the entire convention, they've been emphasizing freedom, freedom, freedom,
right.
And they're regaining that word. And USA, regaining patriotism, etc.
I love that.
Yeah, but she makes freedom a little bit more real in the speech, not generic. Like everybody loves to say freedom. Yeah, but brother, what do you mean?
What does that mean? Exactly.
Yeah. So she, and other speakers also did a good job of this throughout the convention. One of the things that freedom means is the freedom to control your own body. If you don't have control over your own body, do you really have freedom?
No, and by the way, not having control over your own body, not having control over when you have children, or whether or not you can take advantage of medical advancements and fertility treatments to have children, that's not freedom. Like what Republicans have done with reproductive rights is not freedom. And it's not just about establishing a family, it's also about economic freedom for women,
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that she touched on that. I love the fact that she framed it as a freedom issue. I would have liked her to connect the dots to economic freedom, like how reproductive rights translate to economic freedom for women. It's okay. It's a small nitpicky thing. But overall, I thought that was a really strong message. And to your point, Cenk, she was specific, right? This nebulous, like, ooh, freedom thing that we've been hearing from Republicans. I mean, you can scratch beneath the surface and figure out that they're not talking about genuine freedom for ordinary Americans. They're talking about freedom for companies and corporations to do as they please, to pollute our air and water, to not have to deal with certain regulations that might cut into their bottom line. That's the kind of freedom they're talking about. Yeah. The kind of freedom she's talking about is freedom that on a very, very personal level impacts us.
Yes, and another speaker did a great job pointing that out, saying, when they say freedom, they mean freedom from regulation for corporations.
Right.
So they don't have to protect their workers, they don't have to protect their community. That's not real freedom for the American people. Freedom is the ability to control your body. And it would be great if you had a female president signing into law, a national law that says women have reproductive rights and you are not allowed to touch their bodies without permission. A person is not allowed to do it, and the government is not allowed to do it. So, and keep pointing out that they're in favor of big government. Now, I'm gonna get to how you can hold her accountable in a second, in Gaza in a second, and another mistake that Trump made in a second. But I want to talk about one other thing that's adjacent to freedom, which is democracy. That's another word that's thrown around a lot, not explained too much. We all know what democracy is, but they say democracy is sacred, but they just use it as a word. but it's not a sacred word. The word isn't important. The idea is sacred. And why is it sacred? And she touched on it, and I wanted to just talk about it for a second. Guys, democracy is also having control over your own life. Because if we don't have democracy, whether it's a dictator or any other, a theocracy, any other system where someone else is in charge, you lose the most important thing in the world. Do you control your own destiny? Do you have control over your own life? It doesn't get any more central or any more sacred than that. Right. And she talked about how we have to protect that concept, right? And so it isn't just like, oh, Donald Trump doesn't believe in democracy, he tried to kill democracy. Oh, you have to vote for me, otherwise it's gonna kill democracy. We've heard that thousands of times. But when you explain why it's such an offense to the sacred idea of America, then it resonates, right? And then that connects to another central point the Democrats have been making, and she made effectively today. Look, my entire career is for the people. Donald Trump's entire career was for himself. And come on, MAGA, I know you love him, and I know you think that he's for your tribe. I get it, right? And I know that you hate the establishment and you think he hates the establishment. I understand all that, right? But you know that Donald Trump is in it for himself. He almost never talks about anybody else. She said, we've got to work together to be a community and protect one another, and we could do this together, right? Donald Trump said in 2016 at his acceptance speech, I alone can fix this. So it's one, it has rings of every dictator that's ever existed, right? That they make speeches like that. But put that aside. The thing that I'm more worried about is he thinks, as always, me. I want the credit.
And I like that Democrats have finally pivoted to that message. They're still, focusing on how dangerous he is for the country's future. But I think what's an even more effective message, because you see it, now you're anyone who didn't notice it before or didn't connect the dots before is now going to see it every time he speaks, because he can't help but talk about himself, right? About how he's aggrieved, how they did him dirty, how he's the biggest victim. It's all about him. No real vision for the future. And so, talking about the selfishness of Donald Trump, I think is going to be far more effective than constantly simply talking about how dangerous he is. Because we've heard that message. That message has been repeated over and over again for many years now. I think the selfish message is going to be more effective because you're going to see it every time he speaks.
And ironically, Trump proved it perfectly when he did the True Social post in the middle of the speech saying, is she talking about me?
Exactly. There was one other.
You're so dumb, Trump. When they're accusing you of being obsessed with yourself, and the one message you put out in the middle of the speech is about me.
Yeah.
How dumb are you?
He did have a gotcha though, a really important gotcha.
Okay.
Because he also posted, Walz was an assistant coach, not a coach.
What a loser.
Got him.
Trump. I mean, guys, I can't understand how anybody likes Trump. All right, let's keep going though. So, but on Trump, this is the second critical mistake he made. They're finally taking advantage of it. And that's why, guys, throughout the coverage here, we've been a little bit excited and a little bit hopeful, which is unusual for us. I'm hopeful about life and politics in the long run, but you don't often see me be hopeful about politicians, right? But I'm at least hopeful that they've got the right strategy. And finally, they're making smart decisions, correct decisions, right? Both policy-wise and politics. So in this case, on the politics of immigration. So Biden and Harris were in a world of trouble. We had record immigration that was at the border. And Biden had weirdly put Kamala Harris in charge of immigration, actually at least half of immigration, not necessarily the border, et cetera. But those nuances, I think, are unimportant and no one will even remember, right? But he gave her no power to fix it, right? So it was this albatross around her neck. And you could say it's definitely fair to criticize the Biden administration on it, and we did, right? I don't know how fair it is to criticize Kamala Harris, but that's not the point. The point is that giant liability has now become an advantage for him. Why? Because Donald Trump played it so poorly. When he killed the border bill that the Republicans themselves had proposed and written, Now, normally what Democrats would do is go, oh, let's ignore that giant mistake that he made and move on with our lives. And let's talk about democracy and generic things. And he's a bad guy and he's a racist, sexist, et cetera, and totally ruin it, right? But in this case, they're not doing that. They're doing the correct thing, which is say, wait a minute. We had a huge immigration problem. Conservatives were livid about the immigration problem, and rightfully so, right? And we had a bill written by conservatives, ready to go. And we're saying, okay, you guys win. Let's do this bill, okay? And Trump says, I don't want to protect the country. I want to protect me,
right?
My career.
I want something to run on. Me.
Exactly. And if they pound away at that, at some point, not only will it definitely work with independents, enough independents that it could make a difference, but even some portion of Republicans have to go, yeah, wait a minute. Why did he kill a bill we like and a bill he would sign if he got into office? Because if we all believe, conservatives say this all the time, and I believe that you believe, if we all believe that these guys pouring over the border is a real threat to our safety and security, right? So Trump is willing to endanger your family and your security for his own personal gain in his political career.
I mean,
and that is who Trump is.
Obviously, yes.
Yes.
Think about Senator Lankford, a Republican from Oklahoma who worked on that legislation. It was a grab bag of Republican dreams on immigration, really, when you think about it. I mean, it was concession after concession the Democrats engaged in order to agree on that immigration bill. And Trump came in and crushed it. And I remember Lankford in the beginning being furious about that. Because It's like, we've been wanting this bill for how long? And we finally have it. But Trump squashes it for his own electoral advantage. And in the end, by the way, I mean, there's a pretty good chance that Trump doesn't get elected. And so Kamala Harris is saying that she would sign that bill. I would say, there's room to negotiate some of those provisions in that bill. But we'll see what happens. And I like the fact that she didn't drop that issue. Because look, I'm going to be honest. I do think that Democrats dropped the ball on immigration. I do think that Biden should have done more on immigration. And he didn't really pay attention to that issue until it became a real political liability for him. And so they can't let that issue go. Our immigration system is in fact broken. There is a loophole that is really difficult to deal with considering the lack of judges, the lack of personnel we have at the border. We need to fix that issue. And I hope that Democrats do so should she get elected.
Yeah. And then the last thing on Trump is she pointed out last time he had guardrails because he worked with a lot of established politicians and generals, et cetera. And now this time there'll be no guardrails. And if you thought last time was chaotic, wait till you get a load of this time. And I agree with that. But now let's move to our weakness. So the only part of the speech that was disappointing was the part about Gaza. Now, a lot of people, I guarantee you, will look at that speech and go, oh my God, she handled it perfectly. It was so balanced. She said, we love Israel and our heart breaks for October 7th. But hey, Palestinians are also human beings and we care about them. And wouldn't it be great if they were free and independent, right? She didn't even say independent, but good enough. She believes in a two-state solution. Two-state solution is American foreign, is official American policy. And she stated, is that enough? No, of course not. Because those are just words.
Yeah.
And we've been doing words all along. She's pretending she cares about Palestinians, but we sent $26 billion after they killed 40,000, like around 36,000, I believe at the time, Palestinians. At that point, they'd already killed 25,000 women and children. That's a stadium full of dead women and children. We sent them $26 billion as a thank you. She made no policy changes or even hinted at any, and she won't have it.
There is nothing left in Gaza. They leveled Gaza. There is nothing for Palestinians to live in, to deal with. I mean, it's just, maybe this is too harsh, but this is what I believe. Kamala Harris will change absolutely nothing in response to Israel's atrocities in Gaza. It'll be a continuation of Biden's policies. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Nothing will change, nothing.
Yeah, are those policies worse than Biden's? No. I mean, the portion of her speech that talked about it wasn't really a policy. It was just words, right?
Literally the same.
It wasn't any worse than Biden's. It wasn't any better than Biden's.
Exactly.
Is it better than Trump's? Yeah, but Trump's a maniac. That's not a good standard, right? So, so that part was at best mediocre. So that's
awful. Mediocre is not harsh enough. It was awful. It was a continuation of Biden's disastrous failed policies that are brutalizing and killing tens of thousands of innocent people, likely more at this point. We're gonna find out after the rubble is cleared and we see all of those dead bodies, carcasses underneath that rubble. It's disgusting. Okay, so that totally killed the excitement I felt about her speech. I'm just gonna keep it honest.
I know, but Anna, you know so much more than the average person, right? The average person is gonna see that part of the speech and go, that seems balanced. She cares about Israelis, she cares about Palestinians. Yeah, that's why that seems lovely.
That's why I'm here to explain that no, it wasn't lovely and it wasn't balanced. It is a continuation of our government taking our money and funneling it to a far-right government that is committing atrocities against innocent people in Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah.
Period.
So last thing I'll say about it is, I'm just not surprised. Of course, she was never going to, and if you were expecting her to have good policy on Gaza, I'm sorry that your heart was broken, but there was no way she was going to do that. I was a little extra disappointed because she spent more time talking about how Israel has suffered than Gaza has suffered.
Israelis are people, they're human beings, right?
Yeah.
In the eyes of our government, Palestinians not human beings.
So 40 times as many Palestinians have been killed. If you were going to be proportionate and balanced, you would have spent 40 times the amount of time on the suffering of the Palestinians and the Israelis. There's nothing wrong with saying the Israelis have suffered. They did, right? But of course, she's not going to spend 40 times more, but at least give us a sense of proportionality. And if you didn't know that issue at all, and all you heard was Kamala Harris's speech, you would have thought 40,000 Israelis have died and 1,200 Palestinians have died, not the other way around. Okay, so now, we told you the good and the bad, right? But overall, a really great speech. And I hate that Gaza has marred this speech a little bit, and of course her entire run. And there's an easy way to fix it. If you say we're going to withhold the money, there'll be a ceasefire tomorrow. But they don't have the nerve to do that, okay? And that's really disheartening. But all the other things, that does not wipe away all the other things we said. All the other things are true. Two things can be true at the same time. She could be fantastic on some policies and bad on another, okay?
Yep.
So
it's the dialectic.
Right. And by the way, Trump is even worse on Gaza and way worse on all the other policies. Okay, so now, but we are not naive. If she wins, we must hold her accountable. Now, the good news is in this speech and in this campaign, she is giving you a pathway to hold her accountable. Not on purpose, accidentally. Let me tell you what it is. Number one, she keeps emphasizing we are not going back, right? They've said that hundreds of times, we are not going back. So if on a policy position, she goes back, we all need to unite together as Americans and start chanting, we are not going back. We are not going back. You can't tell me, then this is what every Democratic candidate does. And I don't care if you love Democrats more than you love your own mom. You can't tell me that Democrats don't give you a ton of promises and then don't deliver on 80% of them at a bare minimum and then go, good enough, you should be happy, okay? No, this time you don't get to make promises and then go back, because we are not going back. And the second slogan they have is, when we fight, we win. Okay, so when you're in office, and if you go back on any of your promises, we're gonna fight. And when we fight, we win. So this doesn't just apply for Kamala Harris. So the reason I'll speak for myself. The reason I loathe Donald Trump is because he's so selfish. He doesn't care about anybody else. All he cares about is himself, right? And now Kamala Harris, we just told you, did a great job of talking about how she cares for the people and for everyone else. But if you go back and then go do everything that your donors tell you, I know they're gonna do a ton of things that the donors want. They're not gonna give us everything. But if you go back to that same 5-10% BS and go, oh, here, I gave you some crumbs off the table. Ha ha ha, for the people. Hell no. When we fight, we win. And we should fight her if she does that. So guys, it's one thing to get excited. And here we have gotten a little bit excited because they have done progressive things, populist things in a way that was totally unexpected for the Democratic Party. Keep that excitement. I think between her and Trump, it's the biggest no-brainer of all time. Easy, very easy. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, definitely, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you then go, okay, then they're my angels and they're my saviors, and I'm just gonna go home, right? No, you hold them to account. If you don't hold them to account, then your excitement in this moment was about Kamala Harris's career rather than all of us and sticking up for the average American. I don't care about Kamala Harris's career. I don't care about Tim Walz's career. I care about delivering for the American people. Pass the bills, pass the bills. That's keep all of us, keep your eyes on the prize. The prize is not their glory and their status. The prize is the bills that affect your lives and make your lives better. So if you want your life to be better and you care about these policies, again, between Harris and Trump, it's a no-brainer. But just electing her isn't enough. Let's go vote. Let's go make a difference. And then let's hold them accountable.
And let me just say one other thing. I'm gonna say it right now, okay? So you guys, flip it, keep it, because I'm gonna go back to it, I don't know, 4 years from now, 8 years from now. If the Democrats, if she gets elected, and they pull the same old BS, next election cycle, when there's some other generic Republican running and they try to fearmonger to us about how dangerous the Republican is and you have to choose the lesser of two evils, I am done. I am done. I'm not gonna buy it anymore. It's time for Democrats to understand if they don't work for us, we're gonna work for them, period. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm sick of the same argument every single election cycle.
That's right. And what they've done, and what's different here, guys, is that they've reignited hope a little bit. And
barely.
Hold on. That the upside of that is great. We feel terrific. I love hope. I literally started a thing called Operation Hope, right? And that has partly helped to get us here, right? But hope is a dangerous thing because once it starts, and they've started a little bit of a kindle here for that fire, then it turns into a brush fire, and then it turns into a wildfire, and you can't contain it. If you then let us down on that hope and go back to politics as usual and serving the donors, that fire will consume the Democratic Party as well.
There's no recovery after that, okay?
Yeah, that's right. Because look, for a lot of folks, Obama was their first round of hope, and then
crushed them.
Yeah, and they got disappointed.
Right.
Right. And then Bernie was hope, but they crushed him.
They crushed him.
That's right. Now, Tim Walz was the beginning of hope, but Kamala Harris gave a great speech tonight. And overall, I would say it's a home run. As I said earlier, inside the park home run, not perfect, right? But it got there. But after you hit a home run in your acceptance speech, and after you pick a great progressive who got things done in Minnesota like Tim Walz, if you don't deliver on that hope, there will be accountability.
Yeah, and that accountability will impact the entirety of the Democratic Party because the fear mongering is not going to work anymore. You have to choose us because everything's on the line isn't going to work anymore.
That's right.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.